Recently, Sargon of Akkad tried to make a video about feminism, TERFs, and intersectionality. I'm going to take just one sentence in his entire video and explain all of the things he got wrong in just one sentence.
So J.K. Rowling is a TERF, a gender-critical feminist who is opposed to the intersectional feminists on the basis of what it is to be a woman.
Let's take the first part of Carl's statement. J.K. Rowling is a TERF, and he also equates this with being a gender-critical feminist. The easiest way to explain why this is wrong is to explain a little bit about different schools of thoughts within feminism. The RF in TERF stands for radical feminists, and radical feminism is the view that patriarchal gender relations are the primary cause of women's oppression. Within radical feminism, you can see a division between those radical feminists who view themselves as trans-exclusionary radical feminists. There are also those who are trans-inclusive radical feminists. Trans-inclusive radical feminists have a wider scope, a wider understanding of who is a woman, and also want to continue doing advocacy for all women, not just a narrow definition of women. Remember this distinction for later, because it's going to become very important. To help set up how wrong Carl is, I need to explain a little bit more about different schools of thought within feminism. The first one we're going to look at briefly is liberal feminism, and liberal feminism focuses on customs and legal barriers that prevent women's advancement. Liberal feminism often focuses on achieving sexual equality through political and legal reforms. Another area of feminist critical thought is focused on class as the source of conflicts and the source of women's oppression. Now, feminists who focus on these types of issues include Marxist feminists, anarchist feminists, and socialist feminists. In summary, we can see that gender criticism from a feminist perspective already covers the societal structures, which is covered by radical feminism, legal structures covered by liberal feminism, and economic structures covered by Marxist, anarchist, and socialist feminism. I've covered these topics because I want to demonstrate empirically that there really is no such thing as gender-critical feminism. The fact is that all forms of feminism engage in gender critique. So this term, gender-critical feminism, is really just a term that is used to fool others into thinking that somehow TERF bigotry has a basis in feminist theory when it really doesn't. It's just a made-up term to kind of describe a collection of people who are bigoted against trans men and trans women. Given that there is no such thing as gender-critical feminism that covers only TERFs, how can we describe them? They are sex essentialists. Essentialism is a view, and it's pretty well discredited, that holds that things have essences that are permanent, unalterable, and eternal. Therefore, someone who is a sex essentialist thinks that there are persons or traits that are inherently and permanently male or female. Now, when Carl says that J.K. Rowling is a TERF, a gender-critical feminist, he is therefore wrong. What should he have said? He should have said that J.K. Rowling is a TERF, she is a sex essentialist. Having shown that Carl has no idea what he's talking about in just the first half of his sentence that we're looking at, let's move on to the second half of his sentence, where he tries to put TERFs in opposition to intersectional feminists. A few moments ago, I went over the ways that various elements of society and people's lives are covered by existing schools of thoughts within feminism, that being legal issues covered by liberal feminists, social structures covered by radical feminists, and economic structures covered by, I'll just broadly group them as Marxist critique feminists. Now, there's a reason why I didn't have a separate group for intersectional feminists, and that's because there is no distinct group called intersectional feminists. Intersectionality is an analytic framework that takes into account the interconnected nature of race, class, gender, disability, age, immigration status, on and on and on and on, and how these produce overlapping systems of discrimination or disadvantage. Intersectionality as an analytical framework is useful to liberal feminists and radical feminists and Marxist feminists. Therefore, there is no distinct group called intersectional feminists. This is where Karl goes wrong. Even TERFs can use intersectional analysis. And this is just symptomatic of the way that Karl doesn't understand these topics, and so he makes the mistake of thinking that TERFs as a group somehow stand in opposition to intersectional feminists as a group. This is a fundamentally erroneous worldview, and honestly, he's just making his viewers more ignorant and less informed when they take him at his word. When Karl says that J.K. Rowling is opposed to the intersectional feminists, well, once again, he's simply wrong. If Karl actually understood what these topics were and how they interlinked, what would he have said? Well, the correct way to describe this, if we think back to the categories within radical feminism that I mentioned at the beginning of the video, he would have said that J.K. Rowling is opposed to the trans-inclusive radical feminists. In conclusion, because Karl is uninformed, unread, and completely ignorant on the topics of feminism, essentialism, and intersectionality, what he said was, so J.K. Rowling is a TERF, a gender-critical feminist, who is opposed to the intersectional feminists on the basis of what it is to be a woman. If he had a decent understanding of these topics, he would have said something very different. He would have said, so J.K. Rowling is a TERF, a sex essentialist, who is opposed to trans-inclusive radical feminists on the basis of what it is to be a woman. I would just like to take a moment to have you appreciate how profoundly wrong Karl was in only one sentence. And if he was this wrong about just one sentence, just think about how wrong he is generally in this video, because all of his premises follow from this misunderstanding of the topics on which he is speaking. Sargon of Akkad demonstrates once again that he doesn't read, he doesn't research, and he doesn't think. He is a clown. And anyone who gives him either their time or their money is wasting either or both.